Hello everyone and welcome back to ChatCraft. This should be episode 8? I don't know. Kinda lost track. It should be episode 8. And so on the third episode, I received a comment asking me to tell people what I think about religion and other beliefs like horoscopes and whatnot. So I'm expecting a certain backlash from this video, just because it's a touchy topic for people. Now, first of all, religion in itself, I think it has a place, but most major religions, in fact most religions full stop, they overreach themselves, I think. For example, when religions try to intervene in science, that to my mind is just terrible. But besides the point, of course, what I'm mostly, I guess, concerned about is the way religion gets people angry at other religions. And this is something which almost all religions kind of have in common, that people hold a very firm belief in the fact that their religion is the right one. And, or some people do. A lot of the things I'm going to say, by the way, do not apply to every religious person. They don't apply to most religious persons. People, whatever. They apply to some, and that's where the problem already lies, to my mind. Simply because there are those people who believe that religion holds, for example, holds the truth in it that women are inferior to men. There are religions, and most of the major religions, in fact, have somewhere in their holy texts statements to that effect. Women, be subordinate to men. Women, obey your men. Do what the man says. And so, that's to my mind a place where religion, or a point where religion is just utterly wrong, of course. Because there's no justification for saying women are in any way worth less than men. This just isn't. It's not true. But it obviously stems from the fact that a lot of religious texts were written way back in the past. And yes, back in those days, back in the times of the Romans and such, it was indeed an established truth that women were inferior to men. And in those societies, they were treated inferior. They obviously weren't, but like, they weren't in the sense of it wasn't justified to treat them as such, but they were treated as such. They were treated as lesser than men. And so that was put in the religious text, because the men were the ones who had the power, and the men were the ones who wrote the religious text. So, in a way, I keep making this joke about Freud, who, he was the one who basically came up with the theory of everyone wants to sleep with their mother at some stage in their development. And I keep making the joke about, well, he was obviously just a pervert who became a psychologist so he could justify his perversions. I'm not entirely serious about that, but it's just kind of a fun thought. But in a way, with a lot of these religious texts, it seems to be that way, that people just, they believe, because that's what society was like at the time, that women were just inferior, and so they put that in their religious texts in order to justify it. And they were wrong to do so, I believe. Now, you can say a lot of positive things about religion, and for most people nowadays, for the vast majority of religious people, religion is a source of hope and a source of a sense of happiness, a source of moral values. To my mind, it's wrong to state that it's the only source, because from that we would deduce that an atheist has to be an immoral person, and that's just wrong, and I completely disagree with that. But for many people, it's a source of a great deal of good things. So religion, as long as it basically says be nice, be friendly, help others, that's a great thing. It's a great thing to tell people to be nice and help others. That's good. There's nothing negative at all about telling people to be nice and good. Problem is, that's not all religion says. There are more problematic aspects to it when, for example, you're telling people, if you're not member of XY religion, you will go to XY punishment. Most commonly, of course, if you don't believe in Jesus, you will go to hell. And I find that to be incredibly tasteful. Especially, there have been outspoken atheists, of course. And I've seen this in places where basically there was like in loving memory of this and this guy was an atheist, and people came ahead and said he's burning in hell now, he's deserving that for his crimes, the crime of not believing in the same thing I believe in, and that's distasteful and horrible and wrong and disgusting, and not a positive aspect in any way. And I am extremely opposed to people who say that and believe it. Now, that is not to say that, as I said, religion is largely bad. It just has these aspects where at times you really wonder why it does those things, and those things are, to my mind, very immoral. Another point, I guess, would be that it's not a touchy topic, I know, but religion has the danger of indoctrinating children, and most religions do that. Most religions will say that you should teach your children your religion. But the problem is that children are just genetically built to listen to their parents. It's genetically advantageous to listen to your parents. If you think about it, it just is. Your parents are older and wiser than you, and genetically your parents are designed genetically to love you. So obviously any advice your parents give you is in their best judgment. In most cases, there are psychotics, people who are completely insane and sick who actually want to hurt their own children, but it's not the way it's meant to be. It's not the way it generally is. In generally, people want to protect their children. They want to have the best for their children. So obviously, it makes sense for the children to listen to their parents, because those parents want the best for them. So listening to them is obviously a good thing, because they are, to the best of their knowledge, they're going to tell their children the truth, what they assume to be the truth. And that's the problem, to the best of their knowledge. And if the best of their knowledge tells them something that's wrong, they will still tell their children. Because, as I said, they assume that to be correct. They believe they're doing the right thing. And so, I think you shouldn't really be educating children from a young age in religion, as in telling them it's the truth. You can tell them about religious history or what the religion says, but I believe that any teaching of religion in a school should be, I guess the phrase is comparative religion. It should always be a case of okay, this is what this religion says, rather than saying, it is true in our religion that X, Y, and Z. So don't go about telling them that, I don't know, hell is a true place and they are going to go to it if they don't read the Bible every day. Tell them that's what some people believe. And especially don't go in saying, I believe that. At least not until a certain age. And at some point, obviously, a young child isn't capable of making an informed decision on this matter. It's too young. But at some point, just telling them the facts will enable them to make up their own minds, instead of indoctrinating them, not even on purpose, but as a young child, you're obligated genetically to listen to your parents, because genetically it makes sense that whatever they're telling you is the best for you. If your parents tell you not to touch a flame, parents tell you not to run on the streets without looking first, or when there's no lights. Obviously those are good things, and children listen to them because that's genetically the most advantageous thing to do. It just is. There's not really any other way to put it. It makes sense to listen to your parents. So if they tell you that 6,000 years ago someone made the world, he waved his fingers and there it was, everything as it is, children will go ahead and believe that because their parents told them so, and their parents are basically what they have to go on. Their parents are what they are. They are genetically made to believe their parents. So if their parents tell them something like this, they will believe it, despite the fact that it is complete nonsense. So that's what I mean when I say religion should, I don't know, have its proper place. And as I said, if a grown-up, an adult, takes from religion hope and compassion and desire to help and all that, great. I'm 100% for this. I don't mean to destroy religion at all, and I don't mean to destroy faith, even less. Me, I'm technically a mathematician, but if anything, I'm a scientist. So I don't believe that science really has much to say on the subject of a supernatural God. Because by definition, science deals with nature. So something supernatural, above nature. Science cannot make statements about God, as long as God doesn't try to make statements about nature, or rather religious people. I'm unaware of any literal direct evidence of God actually saying ever saying anything. But the point is, of course, a number of religious people aren't entirely happy with just saying there is a God who kind of gives us purpose and morality and all that. They say this God made the earth 6,000 years ago. And again, that's not every religious person. It's mostly, predominantly, an American issue. But it does happen, basically. And that's where I start to worry, because it goes against everything we observe in nature. And so, I believe scientists have no right to say that they have refuted the existence of God. Just as I believe religious people have no right to say that their God goes above science when matters of nature are concerned. And I've also heard it said that atheists will have no moral understanding, because that has to come from God. Which also obviously isn't true. Moral values can just as well come from rational thinking. It doesn't come from science itself, to my mind. I believe science in itself doesn't tell you how to behave properly. Science can help you assess a certain situation. It can help you determine if the outcome is good or bad for people. But the very idea that hurting people is bad, that's not something that science will tell you as such, but it's not necessarily something religion will tell you as such. I believe that comes from rational thinking, from the fact that suffering is bad, and if we see people suffering, it makes us feel bad and uneasy. And from that we, as rationalists, which doesn't have anything to do with science or faith, to my mind, just from thinking about it logically, it can tell you how to behave and telling you that suffering is bad. And from the knowledge that suffering is bad, we can deduce a lot about how we have to behave if we want to behave morally. So there's no monopoly of religion to moral behavior. And I believe that stating like Bible passages saying that, or indeed most religious texts taking passages and saying that's where religion says violence is okay. Now, I don't think that's entirely fair, just like it's not fair saying Hitler was an atheist. He wasn't, or saying Stalin was an atheist, because he actually was, so that's a bit of a better point, but it's not fair. If you assume, if you go by the Bible is the word of God, then yes, it is fair. If God is indeed this eternal, benevolent creator who made everything, then yes, he should have been aware 2,000 years ago that indeed murder those people is not a good thing to tell your people. I've actually heard a horrendous argument a while ago of a guy who said, God is the one who made life, so he's got the right to take away life. So if he told his people to murder another people, that was him being kind because he took those lives back, and he had the right because he gave them life, so it's okay. He just took these people who were being murdered back into his own world and back into heaven so they could be happy there. That's horrendous to my mind. That's terrible. But just but the Bible itself, for example, just because it's the most common one, the same applies to most other religious texts. But the Bible is the one where most people will say that it's the word of God. So it's just the one I'm going with. It's also because of my culture, the one I'm most able to speak about. So I'm not bashing Christianity in particular. It's just, as I said, the one I'm most informed about. The Bible was written by humans, and a human being 2,000 years, or say 1,500, whenever those were actually written in their current form, a human being in those times had very different ideas of morality. Where, for example, murdering members of another people would be perfectly fine if they were invading your country, or if they were invading a bit of land that you thought was yours. So to them it wasn't a morally bad thing to murder these people. So yes, indeed, it does say that, for example, there's that Bible thing about it's not about Easter, but about what Jesus was celebrating himself at Easter. I think it's actually a Jewish tradition, where it was who basically the Jewish people were told by their God, supposedly, to each slaughter a lamb, and then kind of paint their doors or the bits of their houses with the blood of that lamb. And that night God would go through the country of Egypt and murder the firstborn child in every house that did not have their door painted. My moral sense tells me that an entity that goes through a country and kills every firstborn who doesn't believe in him, that's not a benevolent thing, that's not a good thing at all. And if indeed that was the word of God, and if God indeed was an omnipotent, omniscient creature, then yes, that is a very bad God, and believing in him is a bad thing. But it seems to me to be a very bad argument against religion. Religion has been used as a tool by many people, because most religions tell people to just believe something without evidence, because that's what the supernatural is. It's something that cannot have evidence in nature, because it's above nature. It's supernatural. So the problem is telling people to just believe something without evidence. It can be easily abused, that whole mindset. You can tell people to believe that a guy once walked over water without having evidence. It's harmless. If they want to believe that, that's fine. If they then go ahead and tell others, oh, just go ahead, it's a deep lake, but you'll be fine, you can walk on this. That's bad, but obviously I've never heard a religious person saying that. if anybody says that, I disagree. That's a bad way to use your religion, but it's fine if they want to believe that. There's no harm in that to my mind. I personally don't believe it. I think it's rather absurd, but nothing against that. The problem is, if people are willing to believe that, and that's where kind of the whole horoscope and other things come in. If people believe that without seeing evidence for it, they might be more easily persuaded to believe other things without there being evidence for it. For example, horoscopes. That the location of the stars has any impact on your life. As in, well, in like the cosmic scale, in a way it does, of course. Mostly because if that star weren't there, or hadn't been there when the light came from it, you would have a different pattern of light in the sky. That sort of influence is obvious and not what horoscopes are talking about. A horoscope is basically saying, because of Saturn's position relative to Mars, next week you're gonna meet a long-term friend. That's horrendous. And that's, I think in a way it stems from people's desire to there being more than just the physical, I guess. Now horoscopes are rather different than religion in the sense that you can conclusively prove those to be wrong because they make predictions. Religion itself doesn't really predict anything, because it's not science. It doesn't try to be, and it's not meant to be a point against it as such. It's, if anything, a point for it. When religion starts making predictions about science, it tends to be dead wrong. Like saying the Earth is 6,000 years old. Dead wrong. Completely wrong. No truth in that whatsoever. But that doesn't have to mean that it doesn't have value. Philosophy doesn't make statements about science, about nature. It's about thinking and certain conclusions we can draw from that. And that doesn't devalue it. It's a valid field of study. Nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with religion, nothing wrong with going to church. It starts being wrong when you strap a bomb to yourself and blow yourself up, and others, in the name of your religion. It starts going wrong when you believe your religion gives you the right to stand judge over other people. To say people who don't believe in the exact same God I happen to believe in are worthless and deserve to be murdered. That's something I am strongly against, and that's, I believe, something religion should never ever do. But aside from that, science can't tell you that there is no God. It can tell you that God did not make the world 6,000 years ago. And there's something rather dangerous which a lot of religious people do, which is they take something science hasn't discovered yet, something science doesn't know anything about yet, and say, that was God. It's something called the God of the Gaps. The God of the Gaps. Whatever. And the problem is that it shrinks God all the time. Back in the days, the sun in the sky was God, the rainbows were God, and all those things have been explained, so God had to stop taking credit for these things. And so if you just take something that's not explained by science currently and say that was God, once it's explained, suddenly it wasn't God anymore, and your God has grown smaller. However, saying that there is some sort of supernatural being, something that gives us purpose, science doesn't touch on those subjects. And I think I find any other sort of God to be difficult to justify, because when you start saying things, concrete things about what God did or what you would expect God to do in certain cases, you arrive at certain problems. And not only the issue of, if God is such a benevolent thing, why does he allow all this suffering? Which is a valid point, but not really what I'm talking about. So in a way, I am slightly skeptical about certain aspects of religion, because it can get people to do the right thing, and that's great, but it's also gotten people to do the wrong thing. Sometimes because other people have used religion, sometimes because people have misunderstood religion. But just if you read through the holy texts of Islam or of Christianity, you will always find passages written thousands of years ago telling you, if your wife doesn't listen to you, beat her up. I object to that strongly, but that was written so long ago in a completely different culture. It was wrong back then to beat women. Make no mistake, I'm not saying it was fine back then. It was just seen as being fine. If your wife didn't listen to you, you had the right to beat her up. You were the man in the house. So that's what people wrote down. It was wrong back then. No doubt about that, as I said, but it was just what you had to go on. It was what society told you. And it takes a very rare kind of mind to get over that. And another thing which I've recently read is, or I've come to conclude rather, it seems inherent in the human mind to somehow find explanations. And if you reach a point where you can work out the explanation yourself, there seems to be a strong instinct to blame this on some divine mechanism, something beyond you. Because we're essentially proud. So, Isaac Newton, for example, he was a great scientist, not someone anyone would call stupid or anything, or backwards or silly, whatever. And he worked out a great deal of physics, and when he started trying to work out why the solar system was stable, because his calculations showed it should all decay and fall apart and collapse and not work. And so he couldn't work it out, and in the end he concluded that that must be the works of God. And it's a kind of pride, I think, where especially smart people, actually, I would say, they see something they can't work out, and instead of saying, I can't work this out, I'm not smart enough, it seems to be a sort of instinct to say, I can't work this out, it has to be impossible to work this out. It has to be the work of God. So that's just a point where a lot of this desire for belief in something comes from. And again, that's the whole astrology and such. Wait, no, astronomy. I'm hoping I didn't get those confused at some point. The problem is those terms, I get them mixed up. What I mean is the stuff about Jupiter and Venus telling you you should not buy a car next week. It comes from the desire to know something, to have a sense of certainty, because that's what astronomy in a sense gives people. And I have nothing against the sense of certainty it gives people. The problem is it plain out lies to them. And it tells them to use that quote-unquote knowledge to impact their decisions, even though that would not be rationally the right thing to do. It impacts decisions even though it shouldn't, in a way that it shouldn't, and in wrong ways at times. That's what I object. I'm hoping that covers what you meant with that question. And what I've said just now, obviously, all of it, that was largely at least my opinion, so you're welcome to disagree. I know religious people tend to be very offended when you say their religion might not be the utter and entire truth. But I've had these discussions before, and I've witnessed them, where people defend intelligent design and creation and such. If you want to believe that, that's in a way your thing, and I don't really have much of a right to try and take that belief away from you. But if you start telling others, and if you say that's the truth and that's scientifically confirmed, and if you start lying about science, then yes, I have every right in the world to point out that you're wrong and to point you out as a liar. Just want to make that point. And anyway, sorry about that. So I'm hoping you you have your questions answered here. If there's any other topic, such as card reading, phrenology, I am happy to repeat my opinion on those. They just don't work, full stop. And I guess that's it from me, so I'll see you soon. Bye bye.